What if the richest man to ever live didn't wear a tech suit or sit in a boardroom, but rode through the desert, draped in gold and followed by tens of thousands? This isn't a myth or a forgotten fable. This is the true story of Mansa Musa, the West African emperor whose wealth was so vast it destabilized entire economies. And yet, most history books barely mention his name. Born in the late 13th century, Musa I ascended the throne of the Mali Empire in 1312. Mali wasn't just a kingdom, it was a colossus. As it stretched across what is now Mali, Senegal, Niger, and parts of Nigeria, it controlled crucial trade routes and, more importantly, the gold mines. In the 14th century, when much of Europe still staggered from famine and disease, the Mali Empire shone like an island of plenty in the Sahel. Its cities were hubs of trade where merchants exchanged salt, skins, and cloth for gold dug from the earth and carried downriver. Mali's wealth was not accidental. It sat astride long-distance trade routes that linked West Africa to North Africa and the wider Islamic world. The court at Niani was a place of ambassadors and traders where news, goods, and scholars met. Mansa Musa inherited not just mines and caravans, but a system that turned rivers and routes into riches, and a throne that expected him to steward, spend, and display that wealth for the sake of empire and faith. Under Musa's rule, Mali became the richest empire in Africa and possibly the world. But who was he, really? Musa was not born a king. He was appointed as deputy to the previous ruler, who mysteriously vanished during an expedition. So when Musa took the throne, he inherited more than power. He inherited a gold empire. So where did all that gold come from? Mali sat on top of the largest gold reserves in the world at the time. Historians estimate Mali supplied over half of the world's gold during the 14th century. But gold wasn't the only treasure. Salt was equally valuable, and Mali was luckily rich in both of them. Add ivory, slaves, cola nuts, and a thriving trans-Saharan trade network, and you have a perfect storm of wealth. Caravans stretched for miles across the dunes, loaded with goods bound for North Africa and the Middle East. Every transaction along those routes enriched Mali and Musa. Modern economists estimate his net worth would exceed $400 billion today, making Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk look modest by comparison. But Musa's legacy isn't just about gold. It's about what he did with it. In 1324, Mansa Musa embarked on a journey that would shock the medieval world. The caravan itself was a moving spectacle. Picture a line of camels and men that blurred the horizon, banners snapping, tents rolled like small city-states, servants and riders in fine linen and dyed silks, and the metallic flash of gold on belts and in bowls. Day after day, they crossed the desert under an indifferent sun. At night, the troop lit a long chain of fires and sang prayers into the wind. For people who lived along the route, the procession must have seemed like a procession of 100 kings, a living demonstration that the ruler of Mali could pour his wealth outward as easily as a river floods its banks. The pilgrimage mixed piety with pageantry. Every gift was both an act of faith and a signal of power. Additionally, he had 80 camels, each carrying up to 300 pounds of pure gold. The caravan stretched as far as the eye could see, fueled by luxury, discipline, and devotion. When Musa reached Cairo, Egypt, he handed out so much gold to the poor, scholars, and merchants that it caused a financial crisis. Gold flooded the market. Its value plummeted. Hyperinflation gripped Cairo and surrounding regions for over a decade. It was the only time in recorded history one man controlled and disrupted the price of gold across 3 continents. He spent, donated, and commissioned projects the entire way to Mecca and back, It wasn't just a pilgrimage, but rather a gold-based donation drive. Before Mansa Musa, many Europeans had little idea what lay beyond the Sahara, but after his pilgrimage, that changed. His journey sparked global curiosity. Cartographers across Europe began adding Mali and Mansa Musa to their maps. The most famous depiction appears in the Catalan Atlas of 1375, where Musa is illustrated holding a gleaming golden scepter and nugget. To outsiders, he became the embodiment of African wealth. To his people, he was a divine king, chosen not only to rule, but to elevate. And that's exactly what he did when he returned. When Mansa Musa returned to Mali, he didn't hoard his wealth. He built a legacy. He turned the city of Timbuktu into one of the greatest centers of learning in the medieval world. As he invited scholars, poets, architects, and clerics from across the Islamic world, they came to teach, build, and preserve knowledge. He funded mosques, libraries, and Islamic universities, especially the famed Sankore University, which became home to over 700,000 manuscripts. While much of Europe struggled in the Dark Ages, West Africa, under Musa, experienced a cultural and intellectual renaissance. Arabic, astronomy, medicine, law, and theology flourished, making Mali not just rich, but enlightened. Timbuktu's streets swelled with new voices after Musa's return. Scholars arguing under date palms, copyists bent over manuscripts by lamplight, and traders from distant lands bargaining in a dozen tongues. The city's libraries accumulated works on law, astronomy, medicine, and poetry. Students came from across the desert to study and copy texts by hand. Under Musa's patronage, Timbuktu became less a marketplace of goods than a marketplace of ideas, where gold paid for books and buildings as willingly as it did for spices or cloth. The effect was quiet but lasting. Generations of West African scholars preserved knowledge that might otherwise have been lost to time. Timbuktu had become a beacon for Islamic scholarship, second only to Cairo or Baghdad. Mansa Musa was a devout Muslim, and his reign marked a turning point for Islam in West Africa. He built over 400 mosques, many of them made with mud brick and timber in the distinct Sudano-Sahelian style. They weren't just places of worship, they were schools, community centers, symbols of Mali's spiritual foundation. Islamic law and education took root across the empire, influencing generations. But unlike conquerors who forced religion, Musa led by example. He spread Islam through generosity, infrastructure, and respect. Even today, the mosques of Jenne and Timbuktu stand as architectural marvels and spiritual testaments to his vision. Beyond gold and religion, Mansa Musa was a shrewd leader. He expanded Mali's borders through diplomacy, strategic marriages, and selective conquests. His governance structure balanced power between local chiefs and royal officials, ensuring stability across a vast territory. Mansa Musa died around 1337 after 25 years of rule. He left behind an empire admired by the world, but its future was uncertain. His sons lacked his charisma and vision. The empire continued for another century but faced internal divisions and growing pressure from neighboring powers. Eventually, the Songhai Empire would rise and eclipse Mali, but Musa's legend endured. In African oral history, in Islamic scholarship, and in the imagination of those who dreamed of gold cities beyond the sand. So why isn't Mansa Musa taught in every history book? Why don't we mention his name alongside Caesar, Napoleon, or Genghis Khan? Today, Mansa Musa is being rediscovered by historians, artists, and even entrepreneurs. He's become a symbol of African excellence, ambition, and possibility.